talking to Pretoria, South Africa, met Maretha. And then we were able to collaborate on some research in the past, and now we're hoping to move that along with Cindy's expertise in both community and, well, I mean, community and youth-focused research. Maretha is a psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Pretoria, where she has many responsibilities. But one of them is in HIV-related research and also in community-based research. We've been talking about implementation science, and we're hoping that that is where this is going, as CIRA has such an emphasis on implementation science. So with that, Maretha, we're very pleased to have you here.
This is a little far removed. You can. Yes, go for it. Thanks. My experience with Brian was in 2 projects in South Africa. It started in 2004 and ended about 2010-ish. And, you know, if you have to rewrite something 15 times, and then it's still another rewrite, then you get sort of fed up. So I was not always very keen on this work that we are doing. But I have to say, I have learned a hell of a lot. Because in that way, you learn something. Although it's painful, but eventually you learn how to do it. I can't say I can do it now, but I think I'm better than I was before. So the collaboration really taught us a lot. And it also taught us to do trials and randomized controlled trials and not to feel so connected to the people that you cannot do that. So that is one thing that I've learned about research, that you have to be harsh to actually have to say something at the end of it. Today's talk, I think I want to say something about HIV in South Africa at this stage, just to make a context, and then to talk to about the work that I have done since the projects that Brian was involved in, and then that was mainly on orphans and vulnerable children, some program evaluations and some program developments, and then to the last slide, sort of what now? What is the challenges we experience, and probably how can we do new research on it? So that is what I've just said. So the overall statistics at this stage, we feel very proud to say that we are the world leaders in many things, and we're always the world leaders in the negative behaviors. The largest HIV epidemic, 19% of the world's HIV population is in my country. 15% of new infections, 11% of deaths, and 20% of the people on ART. At least that is a positive thing. The prevalence at this stage is 12.6% of the population as a whole. Of the adult population, it is 18.9%. 15 to 49 years, that is more the reproductive years, of which 60% are women. The incidence, I couldn't work that out precisely in terms of the population, but there's quite a few infections every year, and then most of them is among young women. More than 50% of the adults and the children infected are on medication, and it's going quite well. I think the statistic is about 40 is stable, 40%. And then it doesn't look as if there was any changes, but since 2010, there was a 49 decrease in new infections, and then 29% decrease in HIV-related deaths. So although it doesn't look so, the picture doesn't look that good, there is progress made, and we are moving in the right direction, although there's still a lot of work to do. The background of the orphans and vulnerable population, among which I did some work, There's 3.3 million children who are orphaned by AIDS, about 6% of the population. So in terms of your country, it's not that much, but in terms of our country, it's a large proportion. And they live in extended families with grandparents or in child-headed households because there isn't other facilities to care for them. And if you look at 7 million adults who are HIV infected, meaning that there is a lot of children affected by HIV. They do not have it themselves, but they live in houses where they have to deal with the psychological consequences of HIV. And the risk is that orphanhood and vulnerability create an increased risk for HIV. So that if you do not care for this group, then the pattern can continue. The statistics say that the chance of an orphan child is 3% more to get HIV, and if it's a double orphan where both parents died, then there's even more of a chance to get HIV. The other part of what I would like to say that is, I'm in behavioral prevention, and I feel quite discouraged at this stage because we worked for almost 20 years or more, and we have been successful in promoting condom use. The statistics was higher about 5 years ago. At this stage, it is 58% who reported condom use at last sex. Well, obviously, that is reported figures, but at least there's a conversation going on about condoms, which was not there 20 years ago. I do not think we are that successful in changing sexual risk behavior patterns. That continues. And I think there's a lot of underlying material there that you cannot address it by a very superficial program. The challenges is poverty. Poverty makes you think of today and not about 20 years to come. Mental health of the population, peer group norms, which is extremely strongly negative or encouraging risk behavior, the lack of parental guidance, not lack of parental relationships, but also it's culturally not accepted to speak about sex with your children. So they have other means, but that is at this stage falling apart. Family dynamics, cultural beliefs are quite strong, and then the availability of art. It doesn't mean I have to take HIV into account in my behavior because I can just take medication. So all of these are structural factors that is difficult to overcome and should be addressed. Examples of the projects I want to talk about today is the Cbt project for orphans and vulnerable children, the Let's Talk of the Masikumalu Kalume for young people, for adolescents, and then the Rise Young Women's Club, which is a prevention project. I was involved in this project, the first one as an evaluator, the first and the third one as the external evaluator, and then the middle one I was involved in the development of the program. Isibindi means the strong heart, but creating circles of care for orphans and vulnerable children. It's a community-based care program. It's developed by the National Association of Child Care Workers. They provide training and supervision. And then they advertise for community-based organizations. Who are interested in becoming involved? So the community organization needs the funding, and they need the management skills to manage the project. They advertise for people in the community, often people without a job, men and women who is available and are interested to be trained as child care workers. They train them, and then these child care workers deliver a cost-effective service to the children in their communities. They do get a stipend for the work that they do, but they're not highly paid. And they have about 10 houses to look after. 10 houses of children who are orphaned or extremely vulnerable, sick parents, and they have to look after these houses. The tasks that they have to do, the core of the intervention is home visits to sustain family life, meaning helping them to make food, to make a budget, to do shopping, to do their homework, to take the ill people to the clinic or get their medication. So they look after the physical, educational, and psychosocial needs of the children in need. And this model has been implemented in 2,224 sites at that stage, and that was in 2012, and currently it's been taken over by the government, so it's widely implemented because there is some effectiveness and there is some kind of help for children in need. These children there's nothing wrong with them. Most of them, they're children. They need somebody to care for them, and they need some adult to help them and to be a model for them in their lives. The evaluation we had to do, the assignment was, we are busy with a project. Can you tell us if the children in the project benefit from participating from others who do not? And what is the sustainability of it? So we worked with the 18-year, beyond 18 years old, because they are about to, or they had already dropped out of the project or graduated from the project, to see if there's a difference between them and adolescents in another area who did not participate. So it was a quasi-experimental design with only a post-test because there was no pre-data that we could use. So the Cbt group itself was 400 children, and the non-participants was a smaller sample. We also did 48 focus groups, 4 per site. So we visited 12 of the 224 sites to see how they manage it, and then talk to everybody involved to get an idea of what is going on in this project. I'm not going to go into this. The results was that the Cbt group had more access to social grants. They had higher self-esteem, higher problem-solving ability, and experienced more family support, and they were less risk behavior than in the control group. The males reported less alcohol use, and the females had fewer unwanted pregnancies. So in a way, that was good, because there was some effect that was measurable for these children. The strength of this program lied in the commitment of the child and youth care worker. They were overly committed. If they were not there and they were not so committed, it wouldn't have been a good project. But our feeling was they need more support than they currently get because they're going to burn out. They really took care of these families. And they got intensive training and supervision, so that was also a positive. They had a holistic approach. They didn't only focus on one behavior, they focused on the child. So everything that's necessary to help the child with, they did. They addressed a variety of needs, ranging from household chores, financial management, education support, healthcare, emotional support. So it was a holistic intervention. What they also became in the process is they became a link to the government departments. They had to link them in terms of grants and education, and they also attended the health sessions, but that they could voice the needs of this group and made the government and the authorities aware of that, so that they could develop service. So they became much more than these carers that got the stipend. They became part of the whole community development process, which was not foreseen in the beginning, but that was a very interesting development. There were challenges to sustainability, not in terms of skills that they've learned, but in terms of what happened to them after the program. If they went after the program, they didn't get their grants anymore. Grants went to 18 years, and then they didn't get government grants anymore. The idea was that they go and study, or that they get a job. There wasn't much bursaries for students to study, and they didn't have families to support them. And there was only 20% of these young people who got jobs, because there isn't currently many jobs for young people. So those who exit from Isibindi without being economically independent, being able to support themselves, remained in a vulnerable situation. They began to live on crime and sex work. That was the way to survive. So for the message for the project, if you want to have a sustainable impact, you will have to develop other means for these young people to sustain themselves in living. There isn't a family to support them. So then they started to look at things like micro enterprises and more job opportunities and linking them and getting bursaries for these students. So for the lesson for us is that a project cannot only stay within its limits. It needs to do more so that young people can really benefit from that. Okay, the next project. In this project, I was involved as the developer of the intervention. It was a structured, family-centered adolescent HIV prevention intervention. It came from the work that we have done on the Kolomoko project, where we were working with young children and their parents, and then the people at Tulane University read that and asked if I want to be involved here. It was adolescents and caregivers. What we've done here is that we've looked at all the research and existing programs and took some of the elements that worked and combined it and make it more a South African program. The focus was on mental health, parenting, family, problem solving and bonding, communication about sensitive issues like sex, and then HIV transmission and risk factors. It was based on the research that if you involve the caregiver and the adolescent, that there's much more of a social context that change than only focusing on the individual and keeping the context the same. There's two of them. This one is actually better, but in any case. The theory of change was, if you look at the mental health of families, then there's a chance of having a better caregiver and a better adolescent. And if you add the sexual health parts, then you can actually move from the caregiver, a better caregiver and a better parent, and have adolescents that can make healthy choices. The program looked like that. It was 14 sessions, some separate with adolescents and caregivers separately, and then some joint sessions where they could discuss things amongst themselves and could plan for the future. So on the parent side, it was parenting skills like discipline and how do you look after the emotional needs of the child, but also the emotional needs of the parent. Because the parents also, or the caregivers, the grannies, also had their own depressions and their own anxieties and anger. So we started with them. Who are you? And then moved on to how do you deal with your children. On the other side with the children, we worked with, we worked with emotional issues of adolescence, and then also communication skills in the family. In the second phase, protecting the future, it was about risk behavior and how, for the caregiver, how do you talk with your adolescent about sex? How do you deal with difficult situation in the house? And then for the young people, it was on sexual relationships, how to say no, how to use condoms. And eventually there was joint sessions where they could discuss it together. The caregivers refused in the beginning to say anything about sex because it wasn't the way to do it. Eventually, some of them convinced, especially the younger ones, convinced the others that they didn't grow up that well. So we don't want our children to be in the same position. And then they started even little conversations about sex in the homes. And the children noted it, and the children appreciate that. And the conversations actually increased on many topics after this program. The key elements was it was a support group climate where they could share experiences and learn from each other. Social learning and cognitive behavioral theory was used as an approach. Culturally appropriate scenarios and stories were added that they could really identify with. They received homework every time so that they could practice at home and bring it back and discuss it. And then it was presented by a trained community facilitator in the vernacular. They scripted sessions of how to deal with it. They taught these people to do CBT. Implementation evaluation, it was implemented in 12 groups where 10 families was represented in each group, and it was piloted in 2 local communities. Pre and post evaluation was done with personal interviews with caregivers and adolescents. The results, always the most important results for me as a psychologist was the caregiver and adolescent mental health measured by the depression, anxiety, and stress scale improved significantly. The adolescent and caregiver connection, the relationship, improved significantly. The adolescent caregiver communication about sexuality improved, measured by both of them. Not only the caregiver that think I did well, but that the young people also say we are talking about sexuality and sensitive issues in the home. Adolescent HIV and condom use knowledge improved, and condom negotiation efficacy, but not the refusal efficacy. So there was some change in risk behavior. This was boys. These were for boys and girls. We started with the pilot like that, and currently it's implemented as part of the DREAMS program, only for girls, because DREAMS focus on girls. So at this stage, we missed the boys, and I think it's necessary. In the beginning, there were also male figures, grandfathers attending, which was very nice because that formed a conversation. And currently it's the caregiver, but it's very much the grandmothers. This project is really widely implemented, and they're intended for 18,000 families. Although there wasn't a randomized controlled trial, we're still looking for funds to do it, but they just took it because there wasn't any other program to implement. So this is out in the field with these results. In a way, I feel confident about the relationship part. There was really something happening. I also did the qualitative analysis that you could see there was change. It's different now. But in terms of the sexuality education, I don't know if it's different than any other program. The other program I want to talk about that I was part of the evaluation team is the Soul City Rise Women's Young Women's Clubs. So this is a prevention intervention. They formed almost a social movement with young women, and the goal was to build their sense of social cohesion, resilience, self-efficacy, and give them access to health, social, and economic resources with the idea to reduce HIV infections. It was implemented again to reach and involve 18,000 young women in 2 years, and it was funded by Global Fund. I think you can also already hear what I will say. If you want to involve such a number of people, then it's a numbers chase. And they started it, and they want results in 2 years. So a lot of the focus of the first 2 years was on how to get it right, and how to get the groups formed, and how to get it out there. The intervention was community-based approach to promote behavior change. They had mass media communication that let's start with the groups. They mobilized and they started support groups among young women. And they could actually, anybody could be involved. Anybody interested could be involved in this group. They discussed their issues. They supported each other. They got material, magazines that is distributed to all the groups. Every month they get one, and it's really interesting magazines with any kind of topics that interest women. There is health articles as well, but it was well written and it was interesting to the young people. There was also a RISE TV show on the national TV that they could watch, and then the idea was that they come to the groups and discuss it so that they also get a voice. In the clubs, they also participated in community activities. So they would join the Department of Health in a testing campaign, so that they reached out to communities, and there was a lot of capacity building and leadership building in this group. The results that we found is that they gained a lot in terms of life skills, social and economic skills, how to budget, how to plan a career, leadership, how to resolve conflict. But in the ones below, I'm pressing the wrong button. The ones below, there was no difference in the HIV-related behavior at this stage after 2 years. But it didn't stop here. It's been widely implemented now, and the idea is a lot of the implementation issues is solved at this stage, because there was a lot of management issues and there wasn't enough people to look, mentors in each group. So they were on their own for a month, and then somebody would visit them, and it didn't really work well. And the media didn't always work. The magazine came, but the social media wasn't always, they couldn't connect if they were in a distant place. So it didn't all work, and that is what we also showed to them, that these aspects are not working well and these aspects are working well. This is how you can improve the program. So that was also a focus, not only the outcome, but also an improvement focus. So there's some good in this project. They focused to develop healthy women, and they didn't focus only on HIV. If you focus only on HIV, I think it's a very poor program. But if you focus on the person as a whole, then they can take it with them. They focus on the risk factors to decrease that, and they promote protective factors like self-respect, open communication, health programs, positive peer pressure. It was a flexible program. They just gave the structure, but the young people could decide how they want to implement it, and they took a lot of responsibility in the groups, which they made it their own. And that for me means that this is going to work. It was evidence-based. They did a formative evaluation, and they continued consultation all the time. Everything they want to implement, they get the girls together and they ask them, is this what you want? So they moved from different areas so that they could actually give an input on the content of the program. There was a strong partnership with community organizations, and then the emphasis was on peer support, role modeling, and the development of interpersonal skills. So there's promise in the project, although you cannot say that there's results at this stage. So if you look at the programs that I talk about, this is just a few. There's hundreds of projects carrying on in the country. That there's many projects looking at the intermediate factors that contribute to HIV risk. So they do focus on these things that we struggle with in the prevention of HIV. And the interventions have some positive effects, less than what we would like to see, but there is some positives. hopefully if you combine all the positives, then there will be behavior change. And these interventions are widely implemented. It's not only for a project, they are spread out, so it reach many people. The challenges that we have is high costs and large community infrastructure involved in the implementation of these interventions. So it costs a lot. And if there's not extreme positive results, then you wonder if the money was spent well. And if you spend so much money, then you ask questions, why is it not more effective? There's a lack of community resources and structural factors that are challenges despite program successes. Rigorous program evaluation is needed to actually say if programs work or not, and the incidents will eventually say if it is a success or not. The focus is currently on young women as a risk group, and there's no focus, but a limited focus on young men's risk behavior, their risk patterns, and then the negotiation of gender norms. The behavioral interventions was not so successful in the past 20 years as we would have liked to. But the medical advances is giving us hope at this stage. The treatment as prevention, which is lowering the HIV, not prevalence, but the viral load. So that is helping a lot, and then the PrEP is coming in, and they want to implement it among young women, although I'm not sure the country can afford it to give all the young women PrEP, but that is sort of a highlight that is still coming. We still need behavior change to that because they also need to take it. But that adds something to the behavioral prevention that hopefully helps that we can get rid of this disease. They talk about 2030, and I hope that's possible. Okay.
Thank you.